Good afternoon to everybody. Happy to be here, and frankly, it's a nice break. The past few weeks have been very busy for EMA's Human Medicines Committee, or CHMP. Busy, yes, but productive, I am delighted to say, and I'm very happy, therefore, to give you today a short overview on the approval of our COVID vaccines. Colleagues from EMA who are more experienced with this kind of public stakeholder meetings than I am, they proposed a number of questions, a number of topics, which would probably be of the highest interest. And the EMA colleagues were kind enough to provide slides for each of these topics. So there are 9 questions or topics that I will try to address in the next 20 minutes or so. First, after defining what vaccines we talk about, we will do a tiny bit of molecular biology. That would be topic 3. We will spend quite some time on the clinical trials and the scientific evidence that allowed the approval of these vaccines, topics 4, 5, 6. We will then consider what the availability of these vaccines may mean for our daily life and for special populations, topics 7 and 8. And finally, we will look at the regulatory decision for a conditional marketing authorization for those products. As many as you will have known, and Emma Cook already introduced again, CHMP gave positive opinions on 2 vaccines late in December, just before Christmas, and with the assessment teams working through the holiday season early in January. It has been said before, but let me say it again. Both the development of this vaccine and the regulatory assessment have been done with an unprecedented speed. And this is even more remarkable as we have here a completely new scientific approach. These 2 vaccines are the first 2 RNA vaccines ever. Unlike other vaccines, these innovative RNA vaccines do not contain the virus itself or parts of the virus that will then become the target for the body's immune defense against the virus. These RNA vaccines, they contain only the plan how to make this target with our own cells. They contain only the instructions for producing a specific protein from SARS-CoV-2. But before I get carried away with the very interesting scientific details of these vaccines, some down-to-earth details on the use of these vaccines. Just as many other vaccines, vaccination here means an intramuscular injection, or more specific, to get the full protection, you will need 2 injections 3 or 4 weeks apart. Now, a bit of science, bear with me, because these 2 vaccines are really something new. All vaccines prepare the body's immune system for the defense against a viral or bacterial infection. Can we have the next slide? Whenever the immune system had previous contact with, let's say, a virus, the immune system learns how to deal with that. Whenever the virus comes back, the immune system is better prepared to deal with it. And using this basic principle, other vaccines will contain a more or less harmless variant of the virus itself or parts of the virus. After injection, these parts of the virus will become a target for the body's immune defense against the disease. Simple. Now, what is new? New is that these new mRNA vaccines do not contain the virus. They contain only the messenger RNA for the spike protein. They contain only the plan how to make this characteristic part of the virus. They contain the instructions for producing the spike protein. It will be our own body cells who will translate the mRNA. The body cells will make some of the spike protein using this mRNA, and then break down this messenger RNA, kind of burn after reading. There's no virus. Even the mRNA has been destroyed. There is only the spike protein made by our own cells. But the immune system will recognize this as a foreign protein, as an antigen, as a target, and will build up an immune reaction against it. If later there's a contact with the SARS-CoV-2 virus, with all its own spike proteins on the virus surface, the immune system will recognize and efficiently target it. The immune system had the necessary target practice with the spike protein. Great science, okay? But how do we know that this piece of science works in real life? As usual, efficacy has to be shown in clinical trials. And here we had impressively huge placebo-controlled trials with a very high number of participants, 44,000 for Comirnaty and 30,000 for the Moderna vaccine. Placebo-controlled trials, this means only half of the participants get the vaccine. The other half would get a placebo, a dummy injection. So that the participants could not know whether or not they got the real vaccine, and therefore could not possibly behave differently. For example, be less cautious knowing that they got the real vaccine. In each of those big groups, some participants got ill, got COVID. But most of the participants who got ill, they were in the placebo group, only very few in the vaccine group. To be more precise, for both vaccines, 95% of the cases of the disease were in the placebo group. Only 5% were in the vaccine group. And remember, please, the number of participants in the placebo and in the vaccine group were pretty much the same. This means each vaccine prevents the majority of COVID cases, of symptomatic disease. It does not prevent all, a few escape, but the very vast majority of cases of disease is prevented. We know from the control group, from the placebo group, what would have happened without the vaccine. Within only 6 weeks, approximately, we would have to expect 88 cases, and of these, 84 were prevented by the vaccination. Only 4 were not prevented, got through. Well, good for these 84 participants who did not become ill, and good for our health system. This stressed health system did not need to take care of these additional patients too. It is, by the way, quite remarkable how similar these two products we have here now are. Let's look at Comirnaty first. With a 95% efficacy, or if you want the precise numbers here, with 162 COVID cases in the placebo group and only 8 cases in the vaccine group, outstanding efficacy. Of course, this benefit comes with a risk. There are adverse effects. The more common adverse effects are the very same we see with many vaccines, such as pain at the injection site, or the signs of the immune reaction, chills and fever. More concerning effects, like peripheral facial palsy, are very rare, but of course could be serious, like anaphylactic reactions, and then require appropriate medical care. As I said, the two mRNA vaccines are remarkably similar. For the Moderna product, we have an efficacy of 94%, with, again, the exact numbers, 185 cases in the placebo group and 11 cases in the vaccinated group. And they are quite similar with regard to the adverse effects as well. Local reactions at the injection site, signs of the immune reaction are more frequent, the more severe anaphylactic reactions are fortunately quite rare. So, looking good, no? Well, so far I told you what we do know about the benefits and the risks of these products. Of course, with such a fast development and such a rapid regulatory assessment and approval, there are important things we do not know, or do not know yet, but intend to find out. For example, we do not know how long the protection given by the vaccines will last. We will find out by following the participants in the clinical trials for the next 2 years, and of course by observing when and how many COVID cases will occur on people currently being vaccinated in the campaigns all over the world. But at the moment, frankly, we do not know. Another thing we do not know is whether or to what extent, next slide please, vaccinated people, can they still be, no, one back, sorry. Yes. The question is, can vaccinated people still be infectious? Must we expect that vaccinated persons spread the virus without getting ill themselves? Well, we certainly hope that the vaccine helps here too, but just know, again, we simply do not know. Therefore, this is a quite important message now. Until we know more about this, precautions must not be relaxed. Even after vaccination, even after you get the jab, please continue with the current precautionary measures. Well, this may be disappointing, but the benefits of the vaccines are nevertheless very obvious. There is a clear benefit for the individual. Well, fewer people getting sick, and for society, the healthcare systems will hopefully not be overwhelmed. But while that is impressive and great, we need to be realistic, and allow me to give this message here. Unfortunately, this is not yet the end of the pandemic. This means even with the vaccines approved and becoming available, our life cannot immediately be as before. We must continue social distancing, wear face masks, avoid contacts, and increase hygiene. The exact details how to do that will depend on the local situation and the level of transmission, but please do not relax here. That is really, really important. Well, there's this obvious standard, as just mentioned, all of us should do. And the situation may, of course, be even more complicated in some special situations or for special populations we will address now. There is, of course, the possibility that you and I may have had an infection even without knowing it. Frankly, again, at the moment, we do not know how much additional protection a vaccination provides for someone who survived a COVID-19 infection. But what we do know is that adverse effects, side effects of the vaccination appeared not to be relevantly different. Therefore, we have concluded that it is not necessary to test whether or not you're already possibly immune because you had an infection. You do not need to get a test before getting the vaccine. EMA and the companies are working right now on trials to provide evidence on the benefit and risk in children. Currently, however, the mRNA vaccines are not approved for the use in younger children. And we have only limited data for immunocompromised people. Well, it seems plausible that their weakened immune system may respond less to the vaccine, that they may not have this impressive 95% efficacy. But still, very clearly, we expect that the protection that can be achieved in immunocompromised people still justifies a vaccination. There are extremely limited data from the clinical trials for pregnant and breastfeeding women. What is reassuring, from non-clinical studies, including animal experiments, there's no evidence whatsoever that there would be a particular risk for pregnant or breastfeeding women and their child. Nevertheless, without any really relevant data from the clinical trials, or without experience from the currently starting vaccination campaigns, there is uncertainty, no doubt about that. And therefore, it will need to be a case-by-case decision, considering the risk of exposure and infection, the risk of a more severe course of the disease on one hand, and the benefits of the vaccination on the other. I can be extremely short regarding ethnicities and genders. As the trials were unusually large, with 10,000 of participants, we have a quite good data for various subgroups, gender, ethnicity, age, and so on and so forth. And high efficacy was seen everywhere. Now, based on all this, the benefit-risk decision for these products was obvious. Next slide. What we see is a quite impressive efficacy and mostly mild and transient side effects. This clearly positive benefit-risk balance, together with a high need for vaccines in the current pandemic situation, this allowed us to accelerate the assessment process and grant an early conditional marketing authorization. Conditional means that there is a marketing authorization while we are still missing some data for a complete picture, and that the companies are obliged to provide them. These additional data are expected to cover most of the unknowns I outlined. They will provide evidence how long efficacy lasts, on long-term safety, how well the vaccine protects immunocompromised people, children, and pregnant women, to what extent they prevent asymptomatic disease, spreading the virus, and some details on pharmaceutical particularities of mRNA viruses and vaccines. Allow me to summarize what I tried to tell you. We have approved the first two COVID-19 vaccines. Both are mRNA vaccines, representing a new approach to vaccination, and both showed impressively high efficacy. To make them available as soon as possible, they got a conditional marketing authorization, and therefore we expect important additional information for the near future, for example, on their efficacy in preventing asymptomatic infections. And we will get many additional data now with the rollout of the vaccines in the European Union and globally. But for these post-marketing safety data, it is not CHMP, it is EMA's safety committee, PRAC, who are in the lead.